Today, we're turning our lens from the celestial to the terrestrial, focusing on one of history's most legendary and enigmatic figures, Alexander the Great, or as he's known in the East, Sikandar. He was a man who conquered the known world before the age of 30, a military genius whose tactics are still studied today. His legacy is a supernova that still radiates through the centuries. But what happens when you look past the blinding light of conquest? What do you find in the shadows? You find a human being, with all the complexities, contradictions, and yes, the quirks that make us who we are. Alexander was no different. In fact, his habits were by any measure extraordinary, sometimes brilliant, sometimes disturbing, but always fascinating. We're going to explore the man behind the myth, to understand the personal cosmology that drove him. It's a journey into the mind of a conqueror, a look at the unusual habits and traits that shaped his destiny, and in turn, the destiny of the world. So buckle up. We're about to peel back the layers of legend and look at the peculiar, the personal, and the profound. From his nightly rituals to his grand, world-altering decisions, we'll examine the oddities that defined Alexander. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a character study of a man whose ambitions were, quite literally, cosmic in scale. We're going to explore the strange gravity that pulled this historical giant into his unique orbit. Let's begin. Imagine the most powerful man in the world preparing for sleep. What do you picture? Guards at the door, luxurious silks. For Alexander, the essentials were a bit different. Every single night, no matter where he was, be it a palace in Babylon or a military tent on the frontier of India, he slept with two constant companions under his pillow. One was a dagger, a practical tool for a king in a dangerous world. But the other? A specially prepared copy of Homer's Iliad, a gift from his tutor, the great philosopher Aristotle. This wasn't just casual reading, it was a sacred text for him. This nightly ritual reveals a universe of information about his psyche. He didn't just admire the hero Achilles, he sought to become him. He modeled his life, his passions, his rage, and his quest for eternal glory, kleos as the Greeks called it, on this mythological warrior. The Iliad wasn't just a story, it was his operational manual, his spiritual guide, his personal star to navigate by. By sleeping with the epic poem, he was attempting to absorb its essence through some kind of intellectual osmosis, dreaming the dreams of heroes and waking up ready to enact them on the world stage. What happens when a man conquers the world? The world starts to look different, and more importantly, he starts to see himself differently. As Alexander pushed east, absorbing cultures and kingdoms, a fundamental shift occurred in his self-perception. He began to see himself not just as a king, but as something more. He wasn't merely the son of Philip II of Macedon, he was the son of Zeus Ammon, the king of the gods. This wasn't just a rumor he tolerated, it was a reality he actively cultivated. He visited the oracle of Siwa in the Egyptian desert, and whatever was said there, he came back convinced of his divine parentage. This belief manifested in a deeply controversial demand. He started expecting the kind of reverence reserved for gods. He insisted on proskynesis, the Persian court ritual of bowing or prostrating oneself before the king. For the Persians, this was a sign of respect for their monarch. But for his Greek and Macedonian soldiers, this was an act of worship, reserved only for the gods. To bow to a mortal man, even their king, was sacrilege. It was a cultural collision of cosmic proportions, creating a rift between Alexander and the very men who had followed him to the ends of the earth. He was no longer just their commander, he was asking to be their deity. For all his brilliance and strategic genius, Alexander possessed a kind of dark energy, a volatile core that could erupt with devastating consequences. A major catalyst for these eruptions was alcohol. The Macedonian court was famous for its marathon drinking parties, or symposia, and Alexander was known to indulge to excess. These weren't just social gatherings, they were intense, often competitive, and fueled by copious amounts of unwatered wine. Under its influence, the brilliant commander could become a paranoid tyrant, his judgment clouded by drink and his legendary temper ignited. The most tragic and infamous example of this was the death of Clitus the Black. Clitus was not just a senior officer, he was a close friend who had saved Alexander's life at the Battle of the Granicus. During a drunken banquet in Samarkand, an argument broke out. Clitus, perhaps emboldened by wine himself, criticized Alexander for adopting Persian customs and disowning his Macedonian heritage. In a sudden, blinding rage, Alexander grabbed a spear and ran his old friend through, killing him instantly. The immediate aftermath was a torrent of guilt and remorse, but the act itself revealed a terrifying instability at the heart of the world's most powerful man. A conqueror, by definition, imposes his will and culture on others, but Alexander did something radically different. As he moved through the vast Persian Empire, he began to absorb and adopt the customs of the people he had defeated. This was a deliberate, strategic choice, but it was also a habit that deeply unsettled his own men. He would trade his simple Macedonian cloak and armor for the elaborate, flowing robes and diadem of a Persian king. He encouraged his officers to marry Persian noblewomen, setting an example by taking Persian wives himself. He even incorporated Persian soldiers into his elite units. From a modern perspective, this looks like a brilliant policy of cultural fusion, an attempt to create a new, blended Hellenistic Persian civilization. He understood that you couldn't rule an empire of that size and diversity by remaining a foreign occupier. You had to become part of it. But for his Macedonian veterans, who saw the Persians as their defeated enemies and, barbarians, this was deeply troubling. They saw their king, their hero, going native. It felt like a betrayal of their shared identity and the sacrifices they had made. Alexander was trying to build a new world, but he was alienating the very people who helped him conquer the old one. When astronomers discover a new celestial body, they get the honor of naming it. For Alexander, the world was his sky, and every new city he founded was a new star he could name, and he had a favorite name, Alexandria. This wasn't just a one-time thing. Historians believe he founded as many as 70 cities, and over a dozen of them, scattered from Egypt to the borders of India, were named Alexandria. It was, honestly, the ultimate act of branding, imprinting his own identity onto the very geography of his empire. Each Alexandria was a beacon of Greek culture, a center for trade, and a military outpost. The most famous, of course, is the Alexandria in Egypt, a city designed to be a masterpiece of urban planning and a hub of knowledge, home to its legendary library and lighthouse. But the habit went beyond just naming cities after himself. In a truly remarkable display of ego and affection, he also founded a city named Bucephala. This wasn't named after a god, or a general, or even a family member. It was named in honor of his horse. This compulsion to name things after himself reveals a desire not just for power, but for permanence, a way to ensure that his name, Alexander, would be spoken and remembered across his vast domain for all time. The bond between a human and an animal can be one of the most profound connections we experience. For Alexander, this connection was with his horse, Bucephalus. This wasn't just a mount, this was his partner in conquest, his companion for nearly 2 decades. The legend begins when Alexander was just a boy. A wild, untamable stallion was brought to his father, King Philip. No one could ride him, but Alexander, with incredible insight, noticed the horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned Bucephalus towards the sun, calmed him, and rode him, claiming the magnificent beast for his own. This horse carried him through every major battle, from Greece to India. He was a living symbol of Alexander's own seemingly untamable spirit. So when Bucephalus finally fell, not in a great battle, but from old age and wounds after the Battle of the Hydaspes in modern-day Pakistan, Alexander's grief was immense. He didn't just mourn, he gave his companion the kind of honor reserved for a great general or hero. He conducted a grand funeral and, as we mentioned, founded the city of Bucephala on the spot. It's a testament to a bond that transcended that of a rider and his horse. In Alexander's mind, Bucephalus was an integral part of his own legend. Every great empire, every star system is held together by a central force. For Alexander's empire, that force was Alexander himself. But what happens when that central star collapses? On his deathbed in Babylon, ravaged by fever, his body finally failing him, his generals gathered around. They knew the empire was fragile, held together only by his authority. They asked him the most critical question: to whom do you leave your kingdom? The fate of millions, the future of the known world, hung on his answer. With what was perhaps his last breath, Alexander uttered a phrase that was either a stroke of enigmatic genius or the height of reckless arrogance. "Toi kratistoi," he whispered, which means, "to the strongest." He refused to name a clear successor. He didn't choose his unborn child, his mentally disabled half-brother, or any of his loyal generals. Instead, he threw his empire up for grabs, like a prize to be fought over. It was the ultimate challenge, a final grand contest. The immediate result was not a smooth transition, but chaos. His empire, forged by a singular will, was immediately torn apart by the very men who had helped him build it, sparking 50 years of brutal warfare. Ultimately, what was the fuel for this human supernova? It was an all-consuming obsession with achieving immortality through legend. Alexander didn't just want to be a great king. He wanted his story to be told for millennia, to be sung alongside the epic heroes of old. His entire life was a conscious effort to walk in the footsteps of and then surpass the mythological figures he idolized. His obsession with Achilles from the Iliad was just the beginning. He saw himself as a new Achilles, fighting his own Trojan War against the Persian Empire. He also made a point of visiting sites associated with other legends. He sought to emulate the labors of Heracles or Hercules, another supposed son of Zeus, even attempting a perilous journey through the Gedrosian desert simply because Heracles had supposedly done it. This wasn't just about conquest, it was about myth-making. Every decision, every battle, every city founded was another verse in the epic poem of his own life. He wasn't just conquering territory on a map, he was conquering his own mortality by embedding himself so deeply into the fabric of human history that he could never be forgotten. He was racing against time to become a constellation in the sky of memory. So there you have it. Alexander the Great, or Sikandar, was not just a conqueror defined by battle plans and territorial gains. He was a celestial body of immense complexity, governed by strange and powerful internal forces. His habits, sleeping with Homer, demanding worship, his violent rages, and his profound love for a horse, are not mere historical footnotes. They are the very elements that made him who he was. They show us a man wrestling with divinity and mortality, with loyalty and ego, with the cultures he conquered and the one he came from. These quirks made him both a visionary and a tyrant, a unifier and a destroyer. These oddities are what make him such a fascinating and controversial figure, even 2,300 years after his death. He was a blend of enlightened strategy and raw, primal emotion. He sought to build a new world, but in doing so, perhaps sowed the seeds of its destruction by refusing to name an heir. His story is a powerful reminder that the grandest events in history are often driven by the most personal and sometimes peculiar human traits. The universe of a single human mind can be as vast and as turbulent as the cosmos itself. What do you think? Which of Sikandar's habits did you find the most surprising or revealing? Was it naming a city after his horse, his demand for godlike worship, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments below. And if you know other legendary stories about this incredible figure, share them with our community. The story of Alexander is a conversation that has lasted for millennia, and we're all a part of it now. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the cosmos of a conqueror's mind. Keep looking up.